Instagram just doesn't want us to
Oh
meet.
my goodness. Life is great.
It is.
Life is great.
Wow.
Um, I'd like to shout out Simone, our technical support agent. If anybody needs any advice in the future, she's your person.
Simone,
All
I'm
right.
going to follow up on this. I want you to know
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. For sure. Okay, cool. We're good to go.
All right, we did this.
I don't know what that was about, but hello. Um, cool. So maybe what we'll start with is kind of maybe going through the eternal remedy spiel again, because a lot of people miss that. Um, I'm interested in kind of, yeah, how the idea came about, what informed it, and yeah, how has it become what it is today and continuing to become.
Yeah, of course. So, at our very core, well, thank you all for being here, first of all. It's really cool to actually have more people than just my mom. Um,
I
um,
mind, mind.
and she's not even here. That's the worst part.
I know.
So, yeah, at its core, Eternal Remedy is a collective of brilliant minds and brilliant aestheticians and brilliant writers who come together and seek to reap the psychological benefits of self-examination through artistic experience. And the lens through which we do all that is what we like to call freedom and authenticity, which is basically tenets of existentialist philosophy, not to get too technical.
Yeah.
But but what we believe is that um, the mediums of art, visual arts, and writing in particular, and literature, are great uh, vehicles into the nuances and the complexities of the human condition. And what we
Hmm.
try to do is use those as forums to bring across powerful, transformative, enriching messages. And
Hmm.
we take our work very seriously, especially in times like these, because we think if there's ever a time to explore meaning in a really concerted, direct, concrete way, it's
Yeah.
now, as
Yeah,
we're
for sure.
we're dealing with a lot. And so, Eternal Remedies Project is just to create a sort of safe space for that.
Yeah. I remember it was funny because I was thinking the other day about the first event that I'd gone to that you'd done. I think it was the Etra Experience. And
Okay.
and it was really cool because it felt so palpable. And it was the idea that we were coming into such close proximity with who we think we are, but maybe who we aren't. And that can be a really like paralyzing experience to come face to face with yourself. Sometimes it's really difficult to see, I think. We're filled with these work schedules and commitments um and so that was interesting because that was like 4 or 5 years ago
Yeah.
and
I,
it's so
I
relevant now.
yeah, I really love the phrasing of face to face with yourself. I think that's it's at the core of this. It's a mirror of sorts. It's a unabridged, unrefined, unfiltered mirror. And I really appreciate even having spent the time with you then because I hope we've evolved since then. But I think when we're in crisis, when we're in uh, places that aren't so comfortable and simple, we
Yeah,
have an opportunity to sit with ourselves in a very
yeah,
profound way.
yeah,
And that is scary, and that is a lot of work, and that is daunting at times. It's burdensome at
yeah,
times. And
yeah,
so we're hoping to, I guess, be a partner on that journey.
yeah. That's interesting. That's really cool. So what was the process of like how you how you birthed the idea of eternal remedy? Like what was there like a defining moment when you were like, that's the thing? Or was it something that you started off as one project and then it kind of evolved into itself? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Eternal Remedy actually came about through a moment exactly like this, through moments exactly like this. Giving full credit to my co-founder, Mark, who in absolutely no way seeks any sort of small talk or
Mhm.
superficial conversation through me, and always brings me into the profound and the deep elements of my psychology. And
Mm.
We used to hang out in Florida actually and just sit in coffee shops and talk about the absurdity of just being alive.
Yeah.
Very common
Just
conversation.
yeah. Just regular. Yeah.
And interestingly, still under the oppression of wanting to be masculine men, um,
Mm.
it took us a long time to get to the point that what we found, the healing we found through literature in particular,
Mm.
and him through literature and in writing. And one day he just kind of shared with me some of his works. And I was like, this is brilliant. This is absolutely
Mm.
excellent.
Mm.
And we started to speak about what it would mean to start pushing forward more of that work and
Mm.
to share it with the outside world, which back then, many years ago, was daunting, incredibly
Yeah,
daunting.
yeah. And it was Tumblr. Was it Tumblr? Was that as far back as that one?
It was worse than Tumblr. It's like a WordPress, no design,
Nice,
no
nice.
aesthetics. It was
Yeah,
terrible, actually.
yeah,
But the writing was rich.
yeah. Yeah, that's cool. That was an interesting point that you just mentioned there about masculinity. Like, was it kind of like just a moment where you were like where you would come to face with what it meant to be masculine and or conventionally masculine or masculinity as you've known it growing up? And then was it like a pressing thing? Because that's I think for some people, a lot of these things happen quite abrupt. And for maybe others, it's a continuous process where you realize, something's not really sitting right with the way that I'm living out, you know what I mean? All these kind of preconceived notions that I've adopted.
Yeah, I hope I'm not going to misquote Mark, but if I can speak on behalf of us, I think we realized it became a matter of life and death to evolve
Yeah,
past those narratives.
yeah,
Like the coat just started becoming too heavy to hold, to wear,
yeah, yeah,
and we realized there are so many dark corners. There's so many intricate nuances within the way we were seeing ourselves and our lives
yeah.
that weren't addressed through the typical channels that we walk down through
Mhm.
masculine conversation.
Yeah,
We couldn't touch it through sports. We couldn't touch it through um, locker room talk, whatever that might
yeah, 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 yeah.
be. And
Nice.
so
Yeah, yeah.
it's
That's cool.
we needed a new form. We needed new drugs.
Yeah. And that was art. That's interesting. Like thinking about this question that we'd actually just talked about last week about Teju Cole had mentioned something about what art can offer in the midst of the disaster that will live beyond the disaster. And I
Mm,
think that's been a really like pressing question. And that kind of made me think a little bit about Eternal Remedy because you guys had released a magazine last year. And that was a really, really brilliant way of creating something that could live beyond this crisis. And I
mm.
think that's something that a lot of us as artists and creatives are struggling with is that we're not really sure what it is that we can make that's tangible. Instagram is just something that you put a picture up and then it disappears, or it's not going to be there for generations to come. So it's the idea of like, what can we offer in this moment that will live beyond it?
Yeah, it's a great uh, road to walk down. I think I'm of two minds, or I have two things that emerge when I think of in answering this. One
Yeah.
is um, we in the creative space in the art world are uniquely equipped to address these sort of times because of the framework from which we work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the athlete, the businessman, the female entrepreneur, they
Mm-hmm.
they don't they don't have the sort of faculties that um, touch on what our deepest needs are in these sort of moments. And the second point actually builds on the point of needs. And I think as the artists I speak to, especially the writers, um, their frame of uh, reference is always what are the things that I need to write, and I always ask them if they can pull that a bit further back and take a step back and ask, can you write about your needs? And I think
Yeah.
when you fall into the place of really exploring what it is what is present in the room right now, you're in
Yeah.
you're in social isolation,
Yeah.
you're set apart from people, you're wondering about an ambiguous and confusing sort of future and live states. If you can dive and dig deep into exploring what that is and wrap your words and your colors and your textures around that sort of
Mm.
intricacy, then you're
Yeah.
really giving something to the world that I don't think any other industry or space can provide.
Yeah, for sure. And we're seeing that, like, so many people have said the idea that, like, the market has obviously crashed, and we're so used as artists and creatives to responding to this market. And, we obviously have to move with market trends, but the market isn't what we know it. And so that's kind of forcing us to reach back towards ourselves, um, and ask ourselves, yeah, what is it that we can give? What is it that we can offer that's good, that's valuable, that's important, and it's really true to who we are as individuals as well. And I
Right.
think that's the point where we are, where we're quite, I don't want to say desperate, but there's a desperation and there's a yearning to
Mm,
really make something that is going to last for 10 and 15 and 20 years. And I had this thought the other day, thinking about a lot of grandparents that used to write recipes down on small little paper, like little notepads or little pieces of paper, um, and the idea that we don't really have things that are tangible, and
mm,
that the idea of having things that are tangible and physical, we're losing a lot of libraries and we're losing a lot of our archive centers and things like that. So in moments like this, when we're producing a lot of really beautiful photography and we're writing really amazing articles, like, how will the people that come after us go back and find these really important things that we've done? Like, and I think this particular moment is forcing us to think about what we can make, because arguably all the things that we engaged in 3 to 6 months ago have maybe come to the end of their life in a strange way.
mhm, mhm.
Does that does that make sense? Or
Yeah, I love the point, and I love how much you're digging home uh, the persistence and the enduring of that which matters. And I a saying that I always fall back to and always sit in is love what remains. And
mm,
um, I think the point you're making about
wow, that's
what
deep.
yeah, love what remains.
Yeah,
Um, I love the point that you're making about um, us leaning into, us yearning for that which endures, because what becomes immediately salient in times like these are the things that we've lost, the things that did not remain.
yeah,
Uh, and because of our fixations and uh, our needs for control and
yeah,
longings, we just cannot let go of the things that did not last. But that comes at the expense of loving what remains.
yeah.
And
And
as
in these moments, the things that are remain are often just ourselves.
yes, yeah,
And that's
yeah.
profound. Yeah, in solitude, in quarantine. Yeah,
You get to essence. You get to essence. You strip away forms and you get to essence.
yeah,
And I think that has to be the higher calling of the artist. That
yeah,
it's a practice. It's a mode of being. It's a modality that's endured since literally the beginning of time.
yeah,
There's something core to who we are. There's
yeah,
something definitive about who we are that is best expressed through artistic forms. And
yeah,
I think we need to realize the importance and how much we need to exalt the place of the artist and the creative um,
mhm,
by acknowledging the fact that it has and will and forever will remain. It will
yeah,
endure past crisis. It will thrive during crisis, and that there's a magic to that. And I think if you can focus your practice around that, you're touching on something quite special.
for sure. That's a really important idea. And I think a lot of people who kind of had to just halt what they were doing, have been forced to kind of, reframe everything.
Mhm.
Um, I guess in a weird way, like, as a writer, I'm quite lucky because I just write by myself. And it's so funny. Zadie Smith said something in an interview that I was watching this week about, like, that artists are just always alone and depressed and miserable. And that feels true to me on most days. But the idea that if your work is interdisciplinary, that this particular time can be quite tricky, because if you're a film
Mm.
director or, you know, an artist of a different kind of medium, that you'd have to rely on other people to make the whole project work. And so I think it's, for some people, it's just a pause, you know?
Yes. I want to quickly, this is a bit of an aside, but I just want to quickly speak on film because I think I've been introduced to how powerful art form it is because of the sort of point we're making right now. And that,
Yeah.
you know, Hollywood blockbusters or the more popularized films are formulaic in the sense where they follow this narrative, clearly defined narrative arc. But
Yeah.
films that are godly, that are masterful, are honing into the moment, to the magnification of the amazingness of the actual moment. They're not trying to get you somewhere. They're just trying to
Yeah.
bring your attention to how special this is. And
Yeah.
there's something
Yeah.
divine about that. There's something divine
Yeah.
about being in this space right now and not worrying
Yeah.
about what you're bringing from the past into it or what you hope to achieve in the future. But it's letting go of those crutches, those tools that we use to define and make sense of this experience and being right
Yeah.
here. And I think film is just such a powerful creative medium to bring you into that because its lineage, its trajectory allows for that. You know,
Yeah. Agreed.
something like a sculptor or a painting is much more concrete in that it doesn't suggest motion in the same way.
Mm. Yeah, because we never really look at one thing. We're always looking at these things in relation to ourselves and our experiences. It's continually moving, it's expanding, it's mobile. And I think that brings me to another question that I wanted to ask that I was really interested in, because you've lived in Toronto, as have I, and you moved to New York, or sorry, to London, and you moved to New York. Um, and I think you moving to New York was to London was a really big deal. Like, it's a big deal for it was a big deal for me, like, to know somebody that did this thing, and it was really bold and really big. And I'm interested in how being in all of these different places has informed your work. I'm really curious in the idea of place and the idea that um, the way that we look at architecture, the way that we view our surroundings is informed by other
Mm,
places.
mm.
So I'm just interested in, maybe, having lived in New York myself, my perspective of it is going to be completely different from yours, but there might be similarities having both lived in London.
Mhm,
I'm
mhm.
interested in that relationship, and just wondering if that's informed your art in any way.
Yeah, of course. And again, this is pertinent to the times. I've been speaking to friends that live in New York, live in London, live in Toronto, and I've introduced the question of what does it mean to live in these places now?
Yeah,
Because how we've imagined these spaces is very dependent upon the sort of cultural and institutional things we engage in. It's the
yeah,
art, it's the theater, it's the concerts, the events.
yeah,
That's sort of how we see these places in our imagination. And now
yeah.
that those are put on pause or have fallen wayward, what does it mean to be in those spaces? What is New
Wow,
York
that's
now to you?
deep.
And
That's deep.
so
Because if you're
that's
like,
not
I need to move to New York because the jazz scene in New York is like nothing else, and then all of a sudden all the jazz clubs are closed.
there's
What
no
is New
jazz
York?
scene. There's no
Yeah,
jazz.
that's deep.
But that didn't answer your question. So to answer your question, how has it informed me? Well, I sort of see the world through a bias of social identity, and
Mm,
um, that which is salient in my meaningful social groups becomes a sort of lens through which I navigate myself. So, for example, in Toronto, there's a lot of multicultural newness, young city, vibrant, forward thinking that was
yeah,
is highly valued. And so I onboarded those values. I wear them. And so when I'm
yeah,
thinking about the sort of things that I create, I want to speak to those values consciously and unconsciously.
Yeah.
because that is what's salient in my experience in those spaces. And I didn't
Hmm.
really realize how meaningful that was until I was not only without those Toronto
Wow.
values, but
Yeah.
having onboarded new values in London. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
in London, it kind of knew who it was. It had more
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
self-esteem,
You don't
but
come to
also
London with your own stuff. You come to London and
exactly.
let London show you what it's about.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
London's there to teach you.
Yeah.
Um, and there's this beautiful thing. I really fell in love with electronic music in London because you feel it. It's palpable in the air as you walk around in the evening and in the night. That melancholy. It's like a
Yeah.
sweet melancholy.
Yeah.
Um, and that sort of consciousness started being onboarded in my experience as well.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
subtlety
Yeah.
that
That sounds like a bit like depression. I'm just not
yeah,
really sure.
sure, sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's it's
Yeah.
a, it's a much more refined, luxurious depression. Um,
Nice.
but that is something I learned from there as well. And then you come to New York, and it's a different sort of vibrancy. It's the idea that things are possible, that all can happen,
Mhm.
that everything is available to you. Doors are imaginary, and so bringing those sort of different lenses, those social identities from different places, I've now
Yeah.
sort of built within myself this hybrid, this version of all those into a new thing onto its own. I don't know if I could say the way I approach my creativity and my curation right now and my writing, for example, is
Yeah.
uh, is speaking directly to any of those places. It's speaking directly to the sort of experience that I now have, having gone through
Yeah.
those. And so,
Yeah.
going back to the first point I was making, though, I think it's really meaningful to talk about what now is a city, what now is a big city like a Toronto,
Yeah.
a New York, a London, um, like without the institutions that we formerly engaged with.
Yeah.
What are we now harboring and holding? Again, this is the place of the artist, but what are we
It's hard.
harboring and
We're
holding
holding
that
on
we're
to
going to push
art.
forward?
Yeah. Yeah. Or maybe in the reverse is arts continue to hold on to us and it's what we're tethered to in a way that we didn't really realize, you know?
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Exactly that.
That's really, I really enjoyed that point. That's deep.
What are your thoughts? How has space and place informed your creativity?
Um, I think a lot of it is goes back to the idea of self-expression. I think for me particularly, it's space, it's material, it's physical space, it's geographical space.
Hmm.
It's space to wander, it's space to think, it's room to breathe in a really tangible and material way.
I like.
I think living in a place like London, you'd think the opposite because there's however many million people living here, but the autonomy does really lend to the idea that you can really think about your existence in the world and what you have to bring as an artist and as a creative. I think it's a necessary loneliness. Obviously, for anybody that's lived in a country outside of where they've grown up and you're not with your family and you make new friends and you kind of get involved with the new artistic circle, that you're continuously reinventing yourself.
Mm,
And it's a really interesting process because you're at face to face with the person that you're continuing to become regularly. And that process, like you said before, it can be quite kind of a bit jolting.
mhm,
The
mhm.
idea that you're continuing to relearn yourself as you're bouncing yourself and your experience onto other people. It's happening in real time,
It's
um,
happening. So,
which I think is very different to maybe living somewhere where you're around people that you've known your whole life because you don't there's not necessary pressure to continue to produce, if you
yeah,
will.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
And so I think just in terms of place, it's interesting because I am definitely thinking a lot about history. I'm thinking about
Mm,
local community history and I'm thinking about global history. I think I might have shared this with you before, but interestingly enough, I'm three generations of people who lived in this borough. And there's a really interesting thing where you look at the architecture and the places around you, and they don't look the same as if you were someone that was native to this place. And I think that informs my writing and my creative practice, in that when I'm writing about architecture, when I'm writing about people, when I'm writing about stories, I'm tethering myself to a past narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing where you're always, I guess you could say, returning home, and I'm writing to return home,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I'm needing to return
I like that.
home. And the idea that we're continuing to reshape the way that these places look and feel for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think that is like, that's been something that's been really interesting. You make the place what you need it to be.
Yes. If that's okay, I'd love to go one step deeper into this return home concept because again, I
Okay.
think it's relevant and applicable here. A thought that has occurred to me in the past couple of weeks is what it means to be fearful or uncomfortable with stay home orders. You know,
Yeah.
if we're all sort of under the assumption that returning home is a beautiful thing. Finding home is a beautiful thing. It's an evolution of sorts.
Yeah.
It's additive to your life. How how meaningful is it to now not be finding joy from stay home orders? What does that mean?
Mm.
Why is
Why
something
does that
outside
feel
of
so,
the
why is there
home?
such
Yeah,
tension?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are we without? What are we lacking? What does it mean to not be to not want to be home? I
Yeah.
think that is one of the needs that I would love the artists in this time to really dig deep into
Mm.
and without reserve, because what can't we sit with? What is present in our lived dimensional four box houses that we can't
Yeah.
live with, that we're
Our
afraid
four
to
box
live with?
flat with no garden and no, and just the flat on the third floor. Yeah.
Yeah.
What does it feel like for you? Like, what, when you think about the idea of home, what are you drawn to?
Hmm. Wow. I think it goes back to social identity again.
Yeah.
Family is one of them.
Yeah.
Whatever has been built, whatever concept of homeliness I've built through family, it's one of them, and that could be through things as concrete as cooking and food and the
Yeah.
sort of cultural food that I grew up and was raised on, the smells from that.
Yeah.
And it could be much more abstract, like something like unconditional love. You know,
Yeah. Or Drake.
yeah, Drake is very important. Drake is very important for my concept of hope, uh, especially certain songs. Certain songs I need.
So
Um,
far gone? Come now.
um, but yeah, I can't imagine. I can't dissociate an idea of unconditional love and hope. Like that to me is
Yeah.
inextricably wed. The two are
Yeah.
too
Yeah.
similar to unravel. And so basically what I'm saying is I left my home as you did to
Yeah.
go on this whatever journey that we're on, this life journey that
Yeah.
we're on. And I still have always held on to the idea of returning home. And even in this time when we're asked to stay home, I'm wondering what more do I need before I get there?
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, it's definitely been food. Um, is the place that I can return to that feels quite grounding. And it's interesting because it's in thinking about history and thinking back to where we come from, and it's music as well. Um,
Yes.
just listening to like conscious reggae and eating whatever. Do you know what I mean? Those are
Yeah.
moments that I think ground you to something that is bigger than this moment and is bigger than you, and feels like it connects you to this larger narrative and this larger story. And I think that is one of the ways that home feels very present inside. And I don't just mean home is Toronto or home is wherever country we're from, but this home is in this global community and something that tethers us to each other.
Yes.
And I think that is something really beautiful. And if we can find what those things are that connect us interdisciplinary, that connect us cross generationally, that will connect us for the next 10 to 15 years. And that is the thing that we want to hold on to. That's the thing that we want to bring forward. And I think that's why a lot of my creative practice has necessarily fed through food, because it's a story, and it's an oral story that
Love that.
wasn't classist. It didn't need to be classist. It didn't need to be elitist. It meant that you could make something really beautiful out of 10 pounds, and it meant that 10 people could be a part of this really beautiful space, and we could
Yes.
share stories and we could connect. And I think when we're thinking about um, stories, and we're thinking about history and narrative, we're also thinking about um, how not to be classist, and
Mm.
how not to be elitist, and how to make sure and maintain that things remain accessible. And that's something that we've lost or we have, maybe we're getting it back, but we lost in the art world for a really long time, that art became a commodity that was then resold back to us in redevelopment, in displacement. Um, and so I guess food is one of those places that, yes, you can go out and you can spend 50 pounds on a meal, but you could also do something that feels equally as beautiful in your kitchen, with your tribe, with your friends, and it kind of satiate that desire and that need.
I'm curious to explore with you just more so how you'd conceptualize food as an art form. Like, what are the things that we should pay attention to as the audience? You know, when you're thinking about literature, it's literary flow, it's uh, diving into complex concepts and stories, and bridging the imagined and the real, whatever that is. There's like
Mhm.
pillars we can fall back on to
Yeah.
understanding the art form. But I'm curious to know, as you're pretty much an expert in a very niche space, what should we know as a member of the audience?
Uh, I think first and foremost, I would say that, and I'm obviously biased, but I would say that Black women in particular have been a forefront of the culinary world for so many generations. And I think the interesting and really beautiful thing about things like food, and things like culinary expression, and things like music, is that as working class people, we don't need a very narrow window to be able to make these things happen. We can be poets, we can be musicians, we can be hip hop artists, we can be um, brilliant chefs. And I think with things like literature, there's a very small and narrow window that, with in a lot of ways, requires education. And so I would say, because of the way that the education system is structured, that necessarily casts out a very wide range of and a very wide demographic of people because of class. And so I think one of the really beautiful things about the culinary world is that it's accessible, and it can be accessible to a wide range of people. I
I love
think
that.
and I think that's important, because there's so many different levels to the culinary world. There's fine dining, there's blogging, there's home cooking, there's street food markets, there's loads of different avenues that you can engage in and be a part of, that are connected to this really beautiful story.
Mhm.
Um, I would say, for me, in terms of my culinary expression, a lot of it is about re-envisioning what this middle space looks like, this hyphen space of being um, raised in North America, parents of British and Jamaican descent, and what that means about living in this contemporary world, and how I'm going to express that through food. And so I guess a lot of the ways that I've engaged with ingredients, is to break them down to their compounds and just look at what they are as a thing, without attaching them to a narrative of what I've always known them to be.
Mm. I love that.
So I suppose an example would be root vegetables that are really native to the Caribbean and to Jamaica. We, growing up, only know one or two ways of how to engage with the ingredient, but maybe looking at the ingredient as an individual compound, allowing the art to exist as its own identity, as its own entity, and not imposing myself on the art, but allowing the art to express who it needs to be through me, and me as the conduit of this story, that it's not about me.
Yes.
And so I think that's been something that's been really interesting, because I would look at an ingredient like aloe vera in a way that I would have never looked at it before,
Yeah.
and learn how to poach it,
Yeah.
to take away the sliminess and the bitterness of the ingredient, and learn to transform it in a way that I've never seen it before. And so I think it's been necessarily taking our histories and our stories, and just kind of letting it sit in the back of my mind for a little bit,
Yes.
and just allowing that to rest on my essence and on my spirit, and thinking, what does it mean to be a Black woman in the world as a chef, um, and what can I do to bring this thing forward to the future, I think. And just staring at the ingredients sometimes for 2-3 days has been really interesting, and taking space from it, and
Yeah.
then looking back to it, and it kind of revealing itself in a really interesting way.
Yes. I wish I could encapsulate the energy of what you just said and scale that and give that to everyone who wants to enter a creative space, because that is the sort of mindset and state of being that is restoring, is healing, and is so human that it's difficult to prioritize anything else above that.
Mm.
It's you living in your very essence. It's like you feeling fully realized and expressed in a way. It's that alignment between your unique and solitary experience and the grander, wider experience of being alive. It's that there. It's taking the bits and pieces, the materials we have, the flesh, the language that we have, and putting it
Yeah.
together in a way that is that points to something that is truly ours, truly uniquely ours. Uh,
Mm.
that's fire. That's really good, and I'm sure
Mm.
tastes fire.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know about that yet. That's not for me to say, I don't think. Yeah, have you been cooking a lot since you've been there, or what do you eat? Because I'm eating. The thing with being a chef is you create really, really interesting things for everybody else, but then you just eat like rice and beans, and that's
you're,
kind of a little bit about what I've been doing.
you're like the fashion designer who just wears a tee and some jeans after
That's
the
it.
runway
Old
show.
Navy just sets you good for like the next 20 years, and you don't need to do anything about that. Yeah.
Yes, my cooking's actually all right. I'm not going to downplay my
Okay.
cooking. Um,
Yeah, you.
being vegetarian allows you to be inventive in ways that I don't
And
think.
and your mom's Jamaican,
My mom is Jamaican,
and that means everything.
and because I've been trying since a child to sneak my hand into the pot, I've been watching her in the kitchen for years,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I've learned much. I've learned much.
Yeah,
My mom makes it into a very refined curation. Like she does,
yeah,
a dish is not just a dish to her. It has to be.
yeah.
It's a whole experience.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
It's oxtail. That's the experience. That's what
But
that means. Yeah.
it's touching upon what you're saying though. Food is not just food. It's communication.
Yeah.
It's fellowship. It's journeying. It's not just nutrients. It's not just ingredients. It's a
Yeah.
whole. It's a love language. It's like a way of expressing how you feel to people who might enjoy that sort of thing. It's a beautiful thing. Um,
Yeah.
but I wanna go back to something that we mentioned earlier, if that's okay, because I think it's a
Yeah.
really really pertinent point
Yeah.
in what art has become as this sort of elitist, classist, differentiating sort of entity instead of it being that which it was originally meant and created for and for the people. And I think
Yeah.
now is the time more than ever for the
Yeah.
artist to realize that that gap, that distance that has been created with the industry we've built around us, the
Yeah.
commercialization of art, is
Yeah.
only to the detriment of the artist, only to the
Yeah.
detriment to the quality of the work, and
Mm.
worse so for those of us who need the art, who find life in it, who realize ourselves through it. It's
Yeah.
to our detriment as well. And I think it takes a real brave, sort of thoughtful, considerate point of view to appreciate that your work is more than just this commercial exchange. It's more than the transaction that you might have to see it as because you have real life
Yeah,
demands and pressures. That's tough.
yeah,
That's tough. I'm not
yeah,
saying it's an easy and simple thing, but it is critical
yeah,
because unless we find that sort of space to realize that that which we create in the frame of art and creativity is sacred. It does not belong in the profanity of pure transaction,
yeah,
which
yeah,
is disengaged almost and disinterested.
yeah,
Unless we appreciate it as such, we're doing a disservice to humanity because that's the
yeah,
only safe space. The creative
yeah,
work is the only safe space where that is still preserved at a high level. And
mm,
so going back to your point, I just think it's not worth us brushing by it as much as we do, where we say, yeah, art is this elitist institution. It's like, yeah, and that's really problematic. It's more than
yeah,
just
absolutely.
this
We need
elitist
to
institution.
acknowledge that. Yeah. I think an interesting place to sit is, and this is one of the things that um I've been really thinking about, is as an artist, as a creative, find the thing that makes you money within your practice and do that. Take the commission work that pays you to do the things that you actually enjoy. And that doesn't make you a sellout. That doesn't make you less committed. That doesn't mean that you're not devoted and interested. And I think that's also important to consider as well, is that like it's okay for you to do the commission for a brand that you don't really, that you don't really align with, if
Mhm,
that means that it'll pay you to be able to do the things that you're really devoted to. And I think that is maybe the way that we can straddle that middle place.
mhm,
um
mhm,
I think we're still in a really vulnerable position as artists and creatives, like, and I one of the things that I'm thinking about for myself as well is like a lot of us are going to come out of this. I don't know if anybody will come out of this unscathed. I don't know if anybody will come out of this in the same way that they were when they started. I don't know what it's going to look like for all of us financially. I don't know if
mhm,
we're going to all be able to be these amazing, brilliant artists that we think we can be in our minds, because capitalist barriers might not make that possible.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
but maybe there's a way that we can straddle those two places. Um, yeah, it's one of those things that it's quite tricky. I'm not really sure like what the answer is for myself within my practice, because the restaurant industry as a whole, it doesn't look like it's going to go back to what it was before, with things like social distancing. The whole restaurant experience as it was will have to change inevitably. And
Mhm.
so that puts a really interesting, not interesting actually, it puts a terrible strain on the ways that as chefs, what we'll do and how we'll bring forth the artistic, creativity and expression that we have, to the audience and to the community and the people around us. What will be the way that we can transform that in a way that people can engage with?
Yeah, that point really resonates. I think it has to be said that this is a time of reexamination and attunement.
Yeah,
And we really need to, and I keep saying this in so many words, we really need to get as closely in touch with our real, enduring needs
yeah,
in this time right now than ever.
yeah,
We simply cannot afford. We simply cannot afford to go back to the infrastructure that has brought us here. Um,
yeah,
it's disconnected from human needs. That's the
yeah,
bottom. And
yeah,
if it's disconnected from our needs, it becomes a mode of oppression because
yeah,
we're sitting in it and it governs us, but it
yeah,
doesn't give us anything. And
yeah, of course.
and and as bad as this is, as much suffering as this is causing, as much heartache that will come of this, we do have this very rare, and I'm talking centuries rare space of
Yeah,
sitting down with what it is to be in this very wild, loose, hard to grasp thing called humanity, and
yeah,
start tapping into what it is that we need to function and exist as thriving, healthy human beings.
yeah,
Definitely, we need essential needs. Food is one of
Yeah.
them. Shelter is another. Love, whatever Maslow's hierarchy is. But more than that is what sort of modes of being do we need to have set in place? What sort of
Yeah.
value system do we need to have set in place that will honor that which is actually a need? Because if
Yeah.
you look around you, the institutions that are probably going to fall during this time, I encourage you to genuinely ask yourself if that was deeply tapped into your needs.
Yeah,
If
for
it
sure.
was, why did we keep it alive?
Yeah, absolutely. And we think, yeah, no, for sure. Why did we invest in it? Why did we engage in it? And again, kind of just going back to my practice in particular, is we went out to restaurants to experience the food, but more often than not, we went to coffee shops, went to restaurants to spend time with people that we love and care about.
Yeah,
And so if we take the restaurant out of that experience, the restaurant as a material place out of that experience, we still have each other. And that's a really beautiful thing, is to think like, going to the park and just being at the park, and not
yeah,
going to the park because there's nothing else to do, but just being at the park because you're with the people that you love and you're doing something that you feel that feels good.
yeah,
And I think we're in moments of disaster, we're required to retreat to the fundamentals,
yes,
to the what is it that is absolutely necessary. You
yes,
know, what do I really need to survive? What really makes me happy? How can I love the people in my life in a way that feels really real, to me and to them? Um, if you feel, a bit low one day, that you actually have the opportunity to sit with that feeling and explore where it's coming from. And that, it's a really difficult thing to endure, but where we might have been able to satiate it by going, and meeting a friend and trying to get your mind off of how you were feeling that day, this has given us an opportunity to think, I'm actually really hurt about that thing that happened 15 years ago. So I suppose it's quite traumatic in the way that it's forcing us to explore things that have been resting on our conscience for 10, 15 years and coming head to head with them. But there's something really transformative about this experience. I think there's something really beautiful about even being on this Insta Live
yes,
and seeing the names of people pop up that you went to high school with, or I worked with at a different job, and thinking like, how amazing is that we're in this place where for the most part none of us, we're doing absolutely nothing, and we can just
yes.
share and talk and think about what it is that we're going to be doing in the next 3 to 6 months. um yeah.
Yeah, but think about all the stories, the so beautifully orchestrated and intertwined stories of what we ought to do that brought
Yeah.
us to this moment. Like
Yeah.
everything was a story. Like the way you woke up in the morning, what hurt you, what you felt lost about, what you felt joy and excitement about. That was all a story. And now
Yeah.
that we've had it stripped away from us in a very profound way, uh,
Yeah.
did it serve its purpose when it was in existence?
Yeah.
That's what I've been sitting in personally. Um,
Yeah.
and it ultimately has always pointed to the sense or the sort of depravity that I've had, that I built within myself,
Hmm.
that I was looking to outsource into other things, that I was
Okay.
looking to outsource into the entertainment that I was seeking, that I was looking to outsource into these social interactions and friends and the bonds that were formed there. But it never have I ever really sat down and thought about, if I were to let it go, who do I become? Because
Yeah.
that wasn't available to me then. I couldn't
Yeah.
even fathom the idea of letting it go.
Yeah.
Now that it's no longer present, I now have a chance to remold those sort of identities, those sort of
Yeah.
motives, so that
And there
they
was no
are actually
need to let
healthy.
it go.
Yeah, yeah,
There was no reason to let all of those things go. Do you know what I mean? You think, and it's kind of returning to the idea of physical space, and realizing kind of like, listen, when all of these structures fall, when the restaurant or the convenience store or whatever else, the church and all of these buildings can't reopen, which would be devastating if they couldn't. But if they can't, you still have your connection to your spiritual identity, whether it is whatever it is that you believe in. You still have a connection to the people that you, and I think human connection and human interaction, going back to what we were talking about, might be the thing, and has always been the thing that we've been able to carry on cross generationally through the, throughout the human existence. It's like
Yeah.
without all of these other structures that have been built up, I think at our core we still are who we've always been, and there's something really, really important and really beautiful there,
Yeah, yeah. It endures, it remains. Um,
Yeah.
and it just adds so much more meaning to me sitting down and speaking to you. Like
Mhm.
that becomes that much more enriching of an experience because I know this will remain. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know if me catching up to my Netflix TV shows will remain. I know it's
Yeah.
given me joy at some point. The books that
Yeah.
are around me have given me joy at some point. But I do know for certain that
Yeah.
whatever we create in this space, this
Yeah.
shared experience, this translation of experience between you and me will endure. And I think
Yeah.
that's where again the artist is uniquely equipped to speak on that and to remind us of that. I think no other place I've seen and anyhow has the sort of tools and frameworks and language to really bring our attention to that, bring our attention to the presence and the fullness of that. Like what this is that we're trying to speak on is what will remain.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's wild. It really is. Um, what kind of well, how do you think that the whole thing about quarantine and this crisis will manifest in terms of what projects you'll do with Eternal Remedy going forward?
Yeah, so I'm gonna plug real quick. We're giving we're giving an online version of our magazine away for free because it deals with subjects around loneliness and isolation and silence, and we tackle that in a creative way. And we just think that sort of artistic outlet is healthy, psychologically healthy, and so what we're focused on, how we're trying to pivot is tell stories that matter right now instead
Yeah,
of being too self-indulgent with the content that we're producing. And that's because, again, we take our role as creators very seriously during these times.
yeah,
We want to know that people are still finding reverence in their humanity itself. And I think
yeah.
they will turn to the arts. The politicians don't have the answers for us. The
Mhm.
community leaders unfortunately don't have the answers for us.
Or
But
the money.
or the money,
Or the money.
they definitely don't. That stimulus package is not looking healthy right now.
Yeah,
But there is something that makes this colorful again, and that's you allowing yourself to open up and embrace the sort of creative modality. And I think that exists at every level for every individual. It's not for just for the artist. It's the artist only introduces that sort of being, but that's available to everyone.
yeah,
It's to really see in this moment that we can think outside of our conventions and the very pragmatic ways that we approach life. Those are necessary. We need to recover. Like the world is in a dire state right now. We need to build,
yeah,
reimagine infrastructure. But there's something about our experience during that time and after this time that's going to be very important to us. And I think we do need to sit in some sort of creative space to really understand and explore what that is. And so Eternal Remedy is looking to push that message forward. We're trying to give some sort of online virtual art gallery as we do this. We're working on our next magazine. We're
cool.
going to continue having these chats. Hopefully, we get you back on for this. But it's allowing people to know that this space is still available and it's still accessible to everyone.
Yeah. That's cool. I appreciate that's beautiful, especially the idea of like an online art gallery, and accessibility is something that I've always been really engaged in, something that I always felt was really important because it also speaks to the idea of class and the idea that no matter who you are and where you sit on the economical kind of,
Spectrum.
ladder and the socioeconomic ladder. And no matter who you are, no matter what your identity, that you should be able to we should all be able to access things. And everything should be open for everybody to be a part of and engage in. And I think that's also the way that I've tried to approach my culinary creative bit, is that I don't want, no matter how aesthetically beautiful something is, whoever you are, you should be able to be a part of it. And I think that's important because I'm speaking about so many times in my life where, you don't have enough money to be able to get into an event or a venue, and or you're thinking, I could spend 30, 40, $50 on this, or I could blah, blah, blah. And you're having to weigh these things out, and maybe denying yourself from certain experiences because of, financial exchange and what we consider to be value judgments and things like that.
Yeah.
And so accessibility, and that's the really beautiful thing about this moment as well, is that it's evened and leveled out the playing field. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Artists that we've never been able to speak to and hear are doing Insta lives, and we can get involved and engaged with their experience as artists in a way that maybe we'd have to have paid $150 for a concert. So I think that's been really nice as well, that it's just opened up and created this free market where we can all just be a part of this really beautiful, palpable, energizing, connected moment. And it's really, it can be quite emotional at times.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Very well said, by the way. Very well said. Uh, I think we're moving from austerity, being very strict and constricted with our energy, resources, and time, into
yeah,
abundance, and
yeah,
realizing that it is only through walking with you that I'll
yeah,
get anywhere. I
yeah,
cannot walk. I cannot walk in your way. I cannot, you know, try and lead down this road alone.
mm,
I need your support. I need
yeah,
to support you,
yeah,
and we need to create create spaces of abundance where all of us in unison come together and reap the benefits of our collective ability and talents. And I think exactly as you say, accessibility is the number one step. I
yeah,
need to give you that accessibility. I need to know that you're equipped with the right sort of resources and
yeah,
understanding knowledge, as you spoke on earlier, that so
yeah,
that you can add to my space. And so it's this beautiful exchange that I think will form. And this is me, of course, being an optimist, but it's this beautiful exchange that I think naturally will form, where because the things that we relied on, the institutions that we relied on, are not fully functioning anymore, we'll need
yeah.
to now go back to the heart of it and realize that we're about to get kicked out. Realize that
No.
the human life, the human interconnected life, is of the highest morality.
How much time do we have?
We have 15 seconds, actually.
Wow, thank you so much, everybody. This has been really lovely. Yeah, follow Eternal Remedy, and it was really great.
Can
Yeah, thank you
you
so
plug
much,
yourself
Stephan. Really
too?
appreciate it.
Plug your stuff.
Yeah, I and I, you know me, guys. This is our